is Albrecht waiting to build until a buyer comes in? Is that what I gathered?
Yeah, the idea, because grocery stores are so, especially if you have, you know, a grocery is a very unique structure, very specific. So it's a lot easier for a grocery operator to come in. It's more desirable for them. If they can come in and say, no, I want that to be like this and this to be like that. If you just build a building and say, Mr. Grocery Operator, you have to go there, it's harder to, it's a harder sell. So the idea is to not build it so that a grocery operator can have whatever they want.
And so would Albrecht kind of build to suit then, or we'd have to present and you guys would be willing? Is that what I understand, or would that be all our money?
Well, I think those kinds of, I mean, there's always a balance and a split, and I don't know, I think there's a lot more discussion to be had, and maybe if you are interested, stick around and we can have that kind of discussion, but the actual numbers and all of that, there's a lot of issues to be sorted through.
And so that building that's there now would be like connected in somehow? Is that what everyone's proposing, or is that just going to be demolished?
There's a lot of options. So if you really are interested in want to make the go of it, I mean, there's options for a bigger store, there's options for a smaller store, there's a lot of options. So I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just, going back to the original question about that corner site and kind of piggybacking on what you said, I've lived here in Akron and in the Highland Square neighborhood for about 2.5 years, so I didn't live here when the original planning and discussion happened. So personally, speaking for myself, I'm not wedded to that site. I just want a grocery store. I don't care where it is.
Yeah.
I moved here from a large city and lived in an urban setting where I saw successful grocery stores operating in storefronts. So the idea that you cannot operate a financially successful small grocery store is not something that I am familiar with, because I've seen it happen. I lived in that setting. I also wonder if anybody's looked at what people would be willing to pay for their groceries in order to have a grocery store. I have 2 young children. I don't want to put my kids in the car and drive 20 minutes to the falls to go grocery shopping. I'll pay $4 for a gallon of milk if I can walk 3 blocks to get it, because it's saving me money. I'll buy more expensive groceries here because they're actually cheaper for me. I don't shop at Acme, so for me to go to the grocery store, it's either West Point or it's 20 minutes away. So has there been any study of what kind of prices somebody could actually get away with charging? And would that somehow make it more appealing for somebody to come in? I don't know.
I don't know if it's in a study of the actual prices people would pay, but there's been a study of the socioeconomic area, I think, and the density of the population, the age of the population, the needs of the area. And I know that I'm not even from the outside Chicago area, so I'm familiar with the, walk downtown, go down to the bottom floor and get your groceries idea. I grew up in a small town, but I'm also very familiar with that concept. And you find it most successful in a very densely populated area where there's, the demand, the economic demand is so high for convenience that if they work. Whether or not they'd work here, I mean, what we're seeing, the different studies we've seen have indicated that it's a pretty risky business to see if it would work here. But, it's just hard to say, and so it's a risk. It's a financial risk for anybody coming in, which is why a co-op, I mean, I don't want to push the co-op idea because I think all ideas are really good ideas, but in a co-op, you have a gauge for what people need. You have participation by the neighborhood, you have more buy-in, if you want to say it that way, because people feel a stake in what's going on, and so that makes that a good option. But I know what you mean by, is it really not economically feasible? When you see that, you think, how could it not be?
Right.
But it's a different situation in some ways too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
After the last forum, actually it's related to her thing. Someone had a good idea after the last forum. They said, what if we were willing to put in $50 or $100 a year for some sort of like bonus shopper card or something? That way the community was kind of putting in, or maybe a shopper cart that maybe helped reduce the cost, maybe not for yourself, but for someone who's maybe lower income in the community. Somebody came to me at the last forum, I thought that was a really interesting idea that showed a commitment. I mean, I would throw $50 into it if I had a grocery store in my community once a year, easily. But I know some other people that wouldn't be able to afford it, but if I was somehow able to help them, it sure would make me feel good. And I think that maybe it's related to them, what she was saying.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good thought. I think he's had the same for a long time.
If the city is serious, I know that the council president sounded like he was pretty serious about doing something. Now, if the city can put $500,000 into Israel somewhere, why can't they put some of that money here?
Well, I think that, you know,
if they can do that, they should be able to put some more locally. That's my opinion.
Thank you, and you know what, that's absolutely valid opinion. But I would remind people too that the city has already put money into Highland Square as well through buying the site that the Taco Bell was supposed to go on, cleaning up that area. Not that I need to defend the city, and I'm not. I'm just saying that if you look at it from a bigger picture perspective, the city has put money into Highland Square to help economic development here as well. So, thank you.
They can put some more in.
Well, I'm pretty certain that both the mayor and council are aware that to make a grocery store happen here, it's going to require some amount of additional subsidy on top of the subsidy that the city has already made. What's the appropriate amount is really going to be up to the city council. I mean, just like everything else, there are a lot of good things and a lot of good investments that need to be made in the city everywhere for lots of things. Grocery store here, roads there, bridges here, and police departments there. All that stuff.
Go to Israel, but what do we get out of it?
Well, I mean, they're two different things, but we actually do get something out of that.
What do we get? Two different things.
We get jobs that come back. Those jobs that graduate from that incubator in Israel move here to Akron and create jobs here in Akron. So those jobs help the tax base, who hopefully then create a little bit more money that we can spread around to like grocery stores and things like that.
Well, they can downsize the size of council, that would help too.
Well, here's
that's really a question for council.
Well, there's even more money available.
Here's another point on that.
But I know that both council and the mayor are aware that there are probably some additional subsidy. How much that will be is going to be dependent on what the end project ends up looking like, and frankly, what the city's financial situation is at any particular time, and what's an appropriate investment. I mean, you might think $500,000 for a grocery store is a good investment. Somebody else might think, well, hey, we're Highland Square, we deserve $3 million, or the people down the street may say, well, we think that you should spend that money on something else. So, unfortunately, I don't get to make those decisions. I get to make recommendations.
Really, from the city of Akron's point of view, if we're not involved in sports, we're not going to get anything. From the mayor's point of view, if we're not involved in sports, we're not going to get anything.
Well, I do have to say, I'm sorry.
The white jacket's been, I'm sorry. Did you? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
My name is Raymond Cox. I'm councilman for Ward 8. Well, this is physically not Ward 8. As soon as you get across the street from your triangle, it is. And I think there's considerable interest other than in sports by the city, or there wouldn't be a project here at all. The city invested quite a bit to start with,
It's
correct?
because you're new.
What's that got to do with it?
Because we're adults.
I'm not sure that saying that we're only interested in sports, I'm not sure what that, you want a grocery store? Do you?
We had a grocery store. That's
We did have a grocery store.
I understand that. And the expectation in this development was that there would be a grocery store.
Nobody asked.
And no one has changed their commitment to having a grocery store.
Oh, yeah.
To suggest that we're only committed to sports teams and not grocery stores is simply wrong.
Okay.
I certainly will tell you that I'm committed to a grocery store here, not a sports team. You never asked me.
I haven't met you yet.
And so to offer that comment without even asking me, unfortunately.